Hello and welcome. It's Alexa Linton here, your host for the Whole Horse Podcast. We're here to look at all the ways that the horse industry is changing before our very eyes in very cool, very amazing ways. And we're chatting with the people at the forefront of that change, the professionals, the trainers, the body workers, the researchers that are helping our lives with horses become better and better. Thanks for being here. I love that you're here and listening and learning. And if you ever have a guest that you want to suggest or a topic that you want to hear, just let me know, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. It means a lot, and I look forward to seeing you for season 4. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm here today with someone I've been admiring from afar for quite some time, a few years now, and I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast today. Welcome, Tara Coyote, to the Whole Horse Podcast.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I know I've been watching you sort of through social media and through your beautiful writing and sharing of your journey, which has been quite an incredible one. And I would love, I know a lot of people, a lot of my listeners, some may know you and the work that you do and what's been going on for you. But I'd love you to just share a little bit about your story and what's been happening for you over the last chunky years.
Sure. Happy to be here and happy to share. Thank you so much. Yes, so my name is
Mm-hmm.
Tara Coyote and I live now in Kaua'i, Hawaii. It's a very beautiful place. My dad's side of
Mm-hmm.
the family is from here, so I've got ancestry going back to the 1870s, which is really wonderful. And just a bit my history, I'm coming out with a book in August 2021, and it talks
Yay.
about all of this. It's very exciting. And in the book, I talk about, and I'll just paraphrase it here very briefly. I go from a place of running a very successful Pilates studio in an affluent area in Northern California. From the outside, it looked like I had the perfect life, a beautiful husband, and stepkids and kids, and a very traumatic incident happened, and it really threw me for a loop. It was incredibly painful, and I hit a point of deep depression and not really wanting to live, and was just questioning my life. And at that point, I had not spent time with horses since I was probably a teenager. I was a horse
Mm.
crazy young girl, like many girls are, and I begged my parents for a horse, but I never had one. I would spend my summers in New Hampshire with my cousins, and they had horses, so that was a beautiful experience. But during that time when I was in a really bad place, I had read the books of Linda Kohanov, the Tao of
Mm-hmm.
Equus, about a year before, and I got this instinctive message to spend time with the horses. It was like my intuition was telling me very loudly, because I was just praying for guidance, and the guidance said, go spend time with the horses. And I thought I was a little crazy to hear that, but since I was in such a bad space, I decided to listen, and I found an equine therapist in the area where I lived and started having sessions with her, and it was incredible. It slowly started bringing me out of this year-long depression and not wanting to live. And I eventually decided to go take a workshop with Linda herself and some of her teachers, and it absolutely changed my life, and it brought me out of this dark place to realize that this is my calling. I need to be with the horses, and I also wanted to share this incredible work with others that had helped me out of this dark place. So over a period of time, I slowly sold my Pilates studio and all this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful equipment, and I bought my first Mustang Comanche, who's my soulmate of a horse. I was trained in Linda's teaching methods through Eponaquest, and eventually bought a ranch in Nevada City, Northern California, which I named One Horse Sanctuary, and did lots of events, did workshops and such, private sessions. And during that time, my best friend in 19 years was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and it was really heartbreaking. She was 44 when she was diagnosed, and I was very fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time with her in the hospital and be one of her main caretakers. And sadly, she died, and it was absolutely heartbreaking on so many levels because she was like my soul sister in many ways. And it threw me into a deep amount of grief. And at that point, I was doing the horse work that Linda taught me, and I decided to do grief rituals with horses, which
Mm.
was basically combining grief work with Linda's work because I realized there wasn't really a place in our society for grief. And I ran these events for many, many years, and it was really beautiful. And I'm paraphrasing my story very briefly here. I know it's a lot. Um, so, a year after my dear friend died, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, which was another twist of fate, very difficult, but I sat with it and tried to turn it around as a blessing, like I do with everything that's challenging that comes to me. And I decided to treat it naturally for 2.5 years. And I was doing really, really well until a very stressful incident occurred. And I realized I had to sell my ranch, Wind Horse Sanctuary. And at that point, the cancer had spread to be stage 4. It was in my breast, my lungs, my liver, my spine, and my adrenal glands. And it was very, very hard, very painful physically and emotionally. And at that point, I sold my ranch and I decided to move back home to Kaua'i, Hawaii, where my dad is from, to live in an off the grid yurt. And that point, I was recommended to hospice. I was not doing well. I was dying. I was walking with a cane because the cancer was eroding my bones. I couldn't talk because I had so much cancer in my lungs, and I had to face my fear of doing chemo, which was absolutely terrifying due to the trauma of being around my best friend who died and watching what she went through. I decided I wanted to live and make it through. I did 9 months of chemo. It was very, very difficult. At that point during treatment, I almost died a few times. I ended up breaking my left hip due to bone metastasis, and I had to have double hip surgery and learn to walk
Mm.
again. But I made it through. I finished with treatment in February of 2020, and
Mm-hmm.
I attribute a big part of my healing in conclusion, which is a big part of what the message of my book is about, to the power of healing with horses. How
Mm.
all my horses really have stood by my side and just been potent forms of healing for me, just through being with him. And just to
Mm.
finish up, I now live in this beautiful piece of land in Kauai, and my horses run free on 3.5 acres. And often when I walk outside the door, the horses are just there to greet me, waiting to be fed. So, anyways, I'm very grateful to be alive and just to share my story and to live this beautiful life with horses. So, thank you for asking. That
Mm.
is my story.
Mm. Wow. That is quite a story. Yes. Um, wow. And I've sort of watched like from afar, through that time and um, through um your transition of selling the ranch and, being moving to Kauai and I think the question that was like arose for me was like, my gosh, like this sense of your strength, I guess what it was, like this resiliency, or such a cliche word, but that I saw in you, and sort of this sense of like, how is she doing this, like, what's pro- what's driving this desire to, like you say, be alive, be, you know um to heal, because that's a big healing that you did. Yeah, and it sounds like horses were a big part of that for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that reflection. Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, you know how it is being around horses. They have such huge hearts and such beautiful holders of space. They're just incredibly calming
Mm.
to be around, and just it was incredibly comforting to spend time with them. And then also my dog and cat as well too. But just I really feel like, and speak about this a lot, the horses have saved my life many times now in many ways. They're a
Mm-hmm.
profound blessing to be
Mm-hmm.
around.
Mm. And for you, I want to just rewind a little bit, and I'm going to come back to this piece. But I twigged when you talked about it, doing grief rituals with the horses, because as my oh, it's an area where I kind of hang out as well, and that I've written about. And I would just love to hear what that looked like. I'm just more intrigued than anything to know kind of what that process was at that time with the horses.
Sure. You mean how I ran the grief rituals and what
Yeah.
that looked like? Yeah, great question. So, like I said, I took the foundation of Linda's work and then I combined it. I was very inspired by a man named Francis Weller, who wrote a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. That book really helped me through the hardest parts of grief. And in that book, he talks about suggestions of grief rituals. So I took some of the information from his book, and I would do a day long event from 9 to 5, 10 to 5, something like that. And I would start out um, doing a mandala, which is something Linda does in her
Mm.
trainings, where you draw a picture of how you feel. Because I found that people in the grief process, you know, in our society, we're taught to suppress our grief. So a lot of times they're used to
Yep.
holding it in. And it was pretty amazing, too. People would come with this idea of, oh, I'm grieving my cat or my husband or losing a job or whatever it may be. And then they'd discover through the collective process of being with others that there were so many other pieces of grief they were holding, you know, grief from childhood, lost relationships. So it was a really beautiful situation where collectively we would share our grief together and know it was okay to feel whatever we were feeling. So I structured my day so people could slowly open up to whatever they were holding in. Like I said, we would do a mandala and then I would take them outside. We had this beautiful pond underneath a willow tree, and I would lead them in a
Mm.
body scan, which is basically helping them to tune into their body. Because, as you know, we're so mental based and often don't listen to the signals of our body. So Linda works with the body scan a lot in her work. And then once they tuned into their bodies, I would lead them out and they would be with the horses. And the horses would be in the large corral. So there would be a fence separating the horses from the people, but yet they could reach over and touch the horses if the horses were okay with that. And so they could be with the horses, but there was, you know, a fence to protect both the horses and the people. And I would encourage them just to tune into their body, tune into their emotions, and just allow whatever wanted to come up to come up. So in the process of doing the body scan and being around the horses, it would allow them to open up and tune into, oh wow, you know, I've been holding this in, or whatever it may be. It could be rage, anger, you know, sadness, grief. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, oftentimes, people would cry and be with the horses, and it was just very powerful to witness, you know. And each ritual was different. Each time the horses would show up in a different way because they are individual beings, just like we are, and have their own rhymes and rhythms. And then we would take time to talk about the process. Eventually, we would have lunch and take a break. I would sometimes bring in some writing exercises, but a big part of the day was the stone ritual, which is something that's
Mm.
out of Francis Weller's book, where we would be in my beautiful living room and there would be a big bowl of stones on the table. And another piece too, I forgot to mention at the beginning. At the beginning, I would have them bring altar pieces, you know, a picture of their loved one or rock or whatever they wanted to bring to represent their beloved or whatever they're grieving. And so we would have the altar there. And then for the stone ritual, we would take turns. It would be popcorn style. And somebody, for instance, like say I would go up, I would grab a stone and I would say, this stone represents my friend Deb. She was the one who died. And I could say something about it. I could cry or whatever. I didn't have to say anything if I didn't want to. And then I would put the stone in the bowl, which was on the altar, and there was water in the bowl. And we would take time doing this depending on the size of the group. It'd be like an hour, hour and a half. And it was very profound. Sometimes there'd be this dark, heavy feeling as people are really allowing themselves to feel their grief. But then eventually it would transform to this sense of levity and lightness because all this stuff that had been held within had been spoken and released. And it was really fascinating too to see the communal sense of grief, because say I might say something about I am grieving the environmental destruction of the earth, and then somebody else would tune into it, and so there'd be this whole popcorn style of people grieving something about the earth. And in that process people would understand that they're not alone in their grief, which is something I touched on earlier. So we would do that ritual, and then after the stones were all finished going through and they were in the bowl on the altar, the water, or people felt like they were complete, we would take that beautiful full bowl of stones with water to the lake or the pond where I lived, and we would pour the water into the ponds, or no, we would pour it on the willow tree, excuse me, symbolizing like letting it go back to the earth because the earth can hold it. And then people would take turns throwing the stones into the pond to symbolize letting go of it. And that was so powerful. That was the most powerful part of the day. And there was, a lot of tears and releasing. And then the final part of the day was we would do this ritual with one of the horses where we would be in the large arena I spoke about. And my assistant would be leading one of the horses. And we would be walking around in a circle, naming the things we wanted to let go of, and then also naming the things we wanted to call in. And this was a process that took, 45 minutes, possibly an hour.
Yeah.
So in the process of the whole day, people would be letting go of whatever layers of grief they're holding and then actively calling in whatever it is they want with their life. So it was very profound. People responded that it changed their lives and they felt lighter, and it was a profound honor to do these rituals.
Wow, that sounds really beautiful. Yeah, I think it's so important to provide, almost provide space for that grief to arise. I know I taught some workshops on my book, and then the first day we would always joke that we would needed to bring like 4 boxes of Kleenex. It's just like real messy. Like it was just, as people were sort of digging up stuff. But then the second day was just like this totally different experience as all of that started to lighten, and they could actually they could start to see the truth about things, or just a sense of something different. And it was really, really lovely to feel that shift, through those processes. So I'm loving to hear some really concrete, like these are some things you can do around the grieving process.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really advocate people to do these rituals together. I mean, like what I said, that stone ritual, and it's in Francis Weller's book. He talks about it, like doing it on a monthly basis, because we're so bombarded these days and there's so much in the world, and grief can accumulate, and you have to create time to release it now and then. Otherwise, it, affects our moods, affects our health, and it's so important to release. So I've also trained people to do this work, other people who do the horse work. And I really encourage other facilitators to do it as well, because especially these days, it's really needed.
Yes. Big time right now, for sure, when we're there's a bit of a lot of letting go to do, I believe, for every single human on this planet at the moment, and a lot of grieving happening for a lot of people as well. Yeah, yeah. And I think that we don't always talk about the different things that we grieve for. I think for a lot of people, we just think of grief around death and dying. But, for example, like I hear you sharing about, your wind horse sanctuary and having to let that go for your health. And I can only imagine like the amount of grief that probably happened for you in that process, in that letting go. Um, yeah, yeah, and so I just, yeah, I'm feeling like we often forget these different ways that we are grieving, um, that aren't necessarily like where we think that we would be grieving. Yeah. Mm,
Absolutely. Yeah, and just
mm.
speaking too, it's so true what you just said that we're holding so much more than we know. I mean, I think this past year, 2020, with COVID and all the shifts and changes, I mean, that's been hard for a lot of people for so many reasons, and that's important to be acknowledged too. And that's a whole nother big topic, but
Yeah. Oh, it's a whole other topic. I know I've been kind of coming out of it and just in this like, yeah, it's like I discovered my inner introvert, like my major introvert during this time. And I was before COVID, like salsa dancer, and I go to like massive parties and like 3-day festivals and, the whole 9 yards. And now it's like being in a room with more than 8 people, and I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. I need,
right? It's a big
like,
transition.
uh-oh. It's a transition. It's a transition for sure. Yes, there is a lot happening, and I'm sure you've been hearing news about Canada and some of the things we're going through right now. Much grieving, much emotion happening right now here for so many people. So yeah, I appreciate these pieces because I think it helps us to um, not keep it inside, not stay stuck in those energies. Because yeah, like you say, that can affect so many things, including our health. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely.
mm.
Well, I commend you too on the grief work you've done in your book. I think that's so valid and important.
Yeah, it is. It's super important. Because man, yeah, losing our animals, no small thing. They're our family.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that note, can you tell us a little bit about your animal family there in Kauai now?
Of course, I would love to. Brings me joy to talk about my animals. I love them so much. Yeah, so speaking of the grief, part of what I had to let go of when I left When Horse Sanctuary is that I had 4 beautiful horses. They were, oh, so dear and dear to my heart. But then I decided to move back home to Kauai, which of course is 2,500 miles across the ocean and
Yeah.
not so easy to trailer horses across the ocean, as you can imagine. And
Yeah, I
so,
was gonna ask about that.
yeah, that was, and you know, anyways, so I realized I had to let go of some of them, but of course they were so near to my heart. I didn't want to let go of all of them, though I did contemplate it because I knew that the trip across the ocean would be very hard for them. Just to speak to that, because people often ask to get horses to Hawaii, you could either
Yeah.
fly them or go on a boat. I decided not to fly them because it was crazy expensive, although obviously it'd be a lot quicker. So the usual way is to have them on a boat, which for them, well, let me just back up a little bit. I let go of 2 horses, and that was very hard, but I found them good homes. I was very grateful about it. And I'm still in touch with the dear family
Mm.
that took them in. I'm so grateful for that. So I decided to bring Comanche and Blue, who are my, I guess they were my choice to bring. And they had to take like a 3-week in total trip. because they had
Wow.
to be trailered down. I was in Nevada City, which is Northern California, and then they had to be trailered down 3 hours away to a place called Sonoma, where they were for like a week preparing for the trip. They had to get, immunizations and certain shots to be allowed into the state of Hawaii. And then they were trailered from that place in Sonoma, which is about an hour away, to the Oakland dock in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were on, and this is the reason why I contemplated not even bringing them, because I didn't want to expose them to this or have them, excuse me, have to go through this. But they were in a shipping container, like a Matson shipping container, with other horses
Wow.
for 3 or 4 days with no sunlight, in the shipping container on a giant cargo ship. And so I was thinking, well, do I even want to have my horses go through this? But then I thought, well, okay, they'll
Wow.
be okay. They have each other. They'll be fed. Obviously, there's somebody watching out for them. So they did that. And then they got to Oahu. So there's 5 different Hawaiian islands. I live in
Yep.
Kaua'i. Oahu is the main island where the port of Honolulu is, where they first stopped. And usually the horses would have just a few hours there where they would go through animal inspection, and all of that, and then be brought to Kauai. But there was an issue because some other horses, not my horses, I believe they had ticks. So the whole
Oh.
shipment of horses was delayed. So they had to spend a few more days in Honolulu. And luckily, I was talking with somebody who was telling me they were okay and was watching out for them. So I was grateful for that. And then eventually, once all the horses were cleared, they were brought on another boat, which took about a day to where I live. And then they had to be picked up and trailered to my land. So by the time they got here, they were a lot
Wow.
skinnier because of the stress and just not having the regular diet and such. But it was hilarious. They got to my land, and I thought they'd be kind of freaked out or jittery, but they were actually quite calm. But it was hilarious. I have Blue is a paint horse, so he's white and brown,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful horse. And the dirt here in Kauai, it's red dirt, it's iron rich, which
Yep.
is incredibly hard to get out of clothes, out of animals. So the first thing he did, they both did really, was to roll on the dirt because they were so happy to see the ground again. And then I thought, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's the last time it'll be white again. And it's true. He's kind of a red horse now. So that was their lovely
Oh.
long escapade. And I'm so glad I brought them because, like I said, they've been just the deep cause of my healing. So there you go.
Mm. Mm. Amazing. And yes, and it sounds like you have a dog and a cat as well there.
Yes, I have Zarya. She's an Aussie Shepherd. She's about five and a
Mm.
half. And then a cat, Kismet, who's about 2.5. So they're all such
Aw.
sacred holders of space, as you know. If I'm upset, they'll really come around me. And I feel like this is actually an interesting point I want to bring up. I've been really looking into, like, they help transmute our energy. And it's been very
Mm-hmm.
fascinating because Blue, my paint horse, he developed about a year and a half ago cancer around his eyelids, squamous cell carcinoma.
Ah.
And I've been treating it through very similar methods that I treat the cancer I'm going through. And the vet's been just so shocked and surprised at how well he's doing. Like, the tumors basically disappeared around his eye. He's doing really, really
Wow.
well. So he took on cancer. And then my dog, my dear dog Zarya, I mentioned that I had a hip replacement. Um,
Yes. Yes.
it's almost coming up on 2 years now. But she had to have major surgery in December because one of her ligaments tore or broke, or excuse me, her tendon. But anyway, she had to have a major surgery that was very similar to the surgery that I had for my hip. And
Oh my
so she's been
goodness.
in this point of recovery. So it's uncanny. I've been really tuning into these animals. I mean, I
Yep.
try to say, like, please don't take on my stuff, but I know in a sense we're so close that
Yep.
we're merging in a certain way.
Yeah. It's an interesting um it's something that I've had a lot of clients feel almost like guilt around, if that makes sense, when they see one of their animals exhibiting something similar to what's going on for them, right? And the sense that I've gotten from the animals is that you can't, it doesn't really work to be like, don't do that. Like, just don't do that. Like, that's, it's who they are, their family, right? Like, it's a part of their way of loving or um, being with us. Like, and they would do the same for their herd mate or their, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's a really interesting piece though, because I think, yeah, a lot of the times we can take that on as like, oh my gosh, like, am I causing this? Like, what the heck? But that there's this um, naturalness in it for them. Like, they're not concerned in that way, right?
Yes, that's true. They're such benevolent,
Mm-hmm.
loving beings and so selfless. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like, well, this is just what we do. We love you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm. Oh, and I know that Kauai is, I've been there once now, and it is such beautiful, like such a beautiful healing space as well. How has it been being back?
Oh, yes, you're right. It's so wonderful. There's a Hawaiian word, mana, mana,
Mm-hmm.
which talks about power. So I think about the mana of the Aina. That's Aina. That's also a Hawaiian word. It means land, and I talk about this in my book. And I have a Hawaiian word dictionary, where it's the mana of the Aina, the power of the land. It's just such
Mm.
a undescribable healing energy here, and the fact that my ancestors are from here going back to the 1870s, there's a lot I can attribute to my healing along with the horses from being here. Just the whole energetic of
Mm.
being here. It's very, very clear and clean. Kauai is the most remote island of the world because we're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then Kauai is the farthest removed from the other Hawaiian islands. So it's very pure and pristine, and we're a bit in our isolated bubble here. I mean, of course, for a year we didn't have any tourists in 2020. Now the tourists are back, because the world's getting back to normal. But
Mm-hmm.
we're somewhat isolated, which in many ways is very nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, for a while here on the island, it was like essential travel only, so nobody else could come over. It was just like, oh, this is so nice.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit different now. Things are changing, but yeah, no, I do appreciate that for sure. And I do remember hiking like on the trail, like sort of along the mountainside.
Nepali coast,
Um,
the Kalalea
yeah.
Trail. Yep, yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine doing that. I mean, when we were there was a lot of people and we were hiking with everyone else, but to be in that space on your own or with the quiet. Wow,
Yeah.
what a spot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in
Mm-hmm.
retrospect, I wish I had appreciated the emptiness of the island more, but it's a beautiful, the economy
What
really
a
needed
space.
tourists to be back too because we were
Yeah,
hurting because we're reliant on
no,
tourism.
for
So,
sure.
but yeah, it was a very
Oh.
special time in many ways.
Mm.
Where
Mm.
do you live again? Which island?
Oh, I'm on Vancouver Island.
Okay, okay, great.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So we're not quite so far away from things. Just like an hour and a half ferry ride, and you're here.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, that's still
Really,
some distance. That's nice.
still a little distance. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about your book because you've been sharing little snippets here and there today. But this is coming out. Is it August that it's coming out, or is it out now?
It's not
Coming out soon.
out now. I have my launch team. That's the whole process of self-publishing. They were
Yeah.
reading it, which is great. I'm so grateful for all the support. So
Mm.
it will be published at the beginning of August. Yes, on the Amazon. It's
Yeah.
very exciting. I've been working so hard for over a year, just daily
Yeah.
on it. I mean, it's taken so much focus and persistence, dedication. Like it's basically a compilation of 7 years of writing. I started writing after my friend Deb died as a way to channel all this grief. It's actually really
Yeah.
interesting. When I was a girl, when I was a child, I loved writing. Like I would write stories all the time. And when I was about 19, that was my goal. I said, I want to be a writer. And then I ended up having my son very young. I was 22 when he was born, and that I was a single mom. So I had to put all my energy into that, which was a beautiful experience. But then after Deb died, I just realized, oh, I love writing and this is helping me. It was so cathartic. So basically, I've been writing and blogging and sharing on social media quite extensively since Deb died. And many people said to me,
Mm-hmm.
Tara, when are you going to write a book? Like, put this out there. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was going to do a film called Cancer Thriver Film right before COVID hit, which is all about people thriving with a late stage cancer diagnosis, which was very exciting. I had all these amazing people lined up, and then COVID hit, and I realized I can't travel, other people can't travel. So then I just transferred all my energy into my book, which
Mm.
has been a lot of hard work, but a really beautiful process, and very healing too, going through my story. It was very hard at times because I had to relive certain traumatic incidents, like being with Deb, or when my health was declining. But ultimately, it's been a beautiful experience, and I'm really excited to share it with the world. It's been
Mm.
also a very vulnerable thing because I share some of my most vulnerable stories. So it's taking a lot of courage too, but I'm excited to almost have it done.
Woohoo. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's called Grace, Grit, and Gratitude.
Yes, yes. Grace, grit, and
Yeah.
gratitude.
Wow. Mm. What an awesome title.
Thank you. There's a lot of meaning to those words for me, so it felt appropriate to title it that.
Ah. Well, tell us a little bit about that. What does the title mean for you?
Grace, grit, and gratitude. So grace, actually, I did Kundalini yoga for a long time. It was what got me through a big part of it through Deb's death and all that happened, along with the horses, Kundalini yoga and the horses. So I was very fortunate to get to know this man called Jayadev Singh. I talk about this in my book as well. Um, Back before he became very popular and famous. Since then, he's exploded and become quite a famous figure. He runs a platform called the Life Force Academy online, where you can do classes, and it's pretty amazing what he's created. And he lives in the community where I used to live. Also, his wife Simrit, who's a famous singer as well, and I knew them before they got really famous. And so, anyways, the reason why I'm explaining this is because he would talk about this in his classes about having grace and grit to get through difficult times. So, grace to
Mm.
me means like when something difficult comes your way. I mean, of course, there's this sense of wanting to fight it and like, I hate this. Why is this happening to me? Why me? But then if you drop in and surrender, which was what I had to do when I was going through the hardest part of cancer treatment, to a sense of grace and surrender and acceptance. And the more you let go and surrender into whatever difficult circumstance you're facing, the more it passes through faster. So that's what grace means to me. Grit
Mm.
means, I guess, the ability just to go forward through hard times of just, okay, this is really hard, but I am strong. I feel like there's a quote that I put in my book by Nako Bear and Pua Case. Nako Bear is singer, and Pua Case is a Hawaiian woman activist on the Big Island, very profound medicine woman. And there's a quote saying, "You are so much stronger than you think you are." And that really
Mm.
speaks to me because I feel like we're all incredibly strong. We just have to tap into that. And every challenge is an opportunity for growth. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
grit means to me. And then
Mm-hmm.
gratitude is the sense of finding beauty. Like that has been one of my biggest tools too. Faced with whatever challenge I had, I was like, okay, yes, this is really hard, but I have so much to be grateful for. Look, these beautiful animals I'm surrounded by, or the abundance of nature, or even looking at a tree and recognizing the beauty of that. And just always finding something to be grateful for. Even in the hardest experiences, there was something to be grateful for. And
Mm-hmm.
that has been a big power tool for me. So, attitude
Mm.
of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude. Yes.
That's fun
Amazing.
to explain.
Amazing.
No one's ever asked me that before. So, thank you for that question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think words mean different things to different people, so it's always interesting to get a perspective on that for sure. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
wonderful. And I know recently you made a trip off the island. Yeah, and you went to see the wild horses.
Yes, yes, I did. Yeah, so one of my big tactics for, like 2 years ago, I didn't know if I would live, if I would survive. I was in such a hard space. And so what I realized is that we always have to have, or it is beneficial to have something to look forward to, almost like a carrot of
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to make it through it for this trip or this, whatever it may be. I really encourage everybody to have like a carrot of like, okay, this is my goal. And so I've always had that when
Mm-hmm.
going through a hard time. And one of my bucket list items has been to see the wild horses. And surprisingly enough, when I
Mm.
lived in Nevada City, which is in Northern California, not in Nevada. People often assume it's in Nevada, but it's in Northern California. I lived very close to where the wild horses were, but I was always so busy at my ranch and teaching and taking care of my four horses that I never went to see them. And meanwhile, I have this beautiful Mustang Comanche who's from Nevada, and so I realized when I was here in Kauai, like I want to go see these amazing, majestic wild animals that live out in nature. I'd never done that. So I planned a trip to California. I went out recently in June and saw my family, did some other things, but went with some very dear friends on this amazing tour. If anybody's listening and interested, I highly recommend Sunny Boys Tour, Reno, Nevada. They're
Okay.
excellent, amazing woman. We went out for 3 hours in a van, and she took us to 4 different places where you can just see the wild horses. So we saw a few different herds, and it was so fascinating. Some of the horses we were maybe 20 feet away, some they were much farther away, and it was such a beautiful experience as somebody who loves horses and is used to quote unquote owning horses, which I think it was more like being with horses, but to see them in their natural habitat and their families and their herds, it was incredibly touching. It was definitely one of the highlights of my year. So I highly
Mm.
recommend it. You can go to various places right outside of Reno and see these horses. So,
Wow.
and I know there's a lot of places in North America where you can do this as well. But yeah, it was quite the
Mm.
amazing experience. If anybody's interested, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I saw that one of your Instagram pages now is going to be more dedicated to wild horses and the well-being of wild horses.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I have so many social media pages. One of my pages is at Windhorse Sanctuary on Instagram, and it was my business page. And since I haven't been teaching so much, I decided to take this page, Windhorse Sanctuary on Instagram, to be a page to speak up about the wild horses. It's a topic I'm very, very passionate about. It's pretty tragic what's happening as far as the
Yeah.
roundups and the negligence and the misappropriation of land from the BLM and I can go into it more if you'd like to hear more.
I really would, because I feel like I see, I follow a lot of sanctuaries, and I see these pieces, and I get like little bits, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that. Um, but maybe because I live in Canada and it's a little bit farther removed, but I think it's really important to know about, and to know, you know, what might what might we do to help if that's something we feel like doing. So yeah, I would love you to share a little bit more
Great.
about what you've learned.
Yeah, thank
Hmm.
you for allowing me space to speak about. Yeah, so there's a long history of the wild horses, of course. They've been in North America. I mean, that's a whole nother story. Actually, I won't go into it, but most people believe that they were brought over by the Spanish. Um, and so there's been wild horses in North America, all over North America, and basically all over the world for that matter. But I'm talking about North American horses because that's the subject I know about. And it's a long history going back to Wild Horse Annie, American woman, powerful, amazing leader who started speaking up. I believe it was in 1971, or probably before that, but she
Wow.
got a law in place in 1971. I believe it's called Wild Horse Annie Act. And again, I'm still learning about all this, so I'm trying to speak from accuracy, but giving you a general idea about it. So, and she enacted this law to help protect the wild horses. Um, so let's see, let's talk about the Bureau of Land Management. That's the BLM, and they are the ones in the United States for managing the land and supposedly taking care of these beautiful wild horses. But of course, we know there's a great love of cattle and meat. And the cattle industry is huge, right? It's a big money making
Yeah.
industry because we all love our hamburgers. Or lots of people love their hamburgers. I don't, but lots of people do. And so there's been a big dispute over land because the cattle ranchers want to graze their cattle there, but then there's the wild horses. And the BLM is taking the stand of, well, there's not enough land. And of course, cattle ranchers have more say because, follow the money, which is sad to say. And so there's a long history of these brutal roundups where they take helicopters and they funnel these beautiful wild horse herds into corrals, and it's terrorizing. Can you imagine horses where there's sensitive ways of being followed and pursued by these huge helicopters into these small holding pens? And then families are split up. I mean, it brings up a lot of emotion for me to talk about this because I
Hmm.
have a Mustang and I know how amazing he is. Families are split up. A lot of these horses are sold as meat to be like dog food.
Yeah.
Um, there was a time before the recession where many of them were being adopted, but then the recession hit, and of course, people didn't have as much money. There's still people adopting them, but it has been an issue for a long time where a lot of these horses are held in very inhumane conditions in holding areas where they don't have enough food or water. They're separated from their other herd members. They don't have adequate shelter. It's horrifying. And the reality is that there is enough food and water for these horses out on their land. But the BLM is saying there's not. So there's a lot of layers and levels to it, and there's
Hmm.
a lot of organizations. I would say if anybody's interested to check out American Wild Horse Campaign, they are the leader of doing lawsuits, and there's a great amount of material on their website as far as like contacting your representatives and basically just getting the word out because people don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more I can say, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that resource for sure. Because I think for a lot of people, they're like, what do I do to
Yeah.
help? I mean, any person on here, who's listening, it's going to it breaks my heart to hear of that treatment. I've been watching different organizations for a while in different ways, and sort of, okay, how do I help? Like, who's the best, where is, my Like if I'm going to donate, where's the best place, those sorts of things. Right. And I'm sure I'm not the only one asking those questions. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm appreciating that you're, you know, getting in, you're getting into the melee a little bit and like helping us to find our way to support the wild horses in whatever way we're able to. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you
Yeah.
for acknowledging. I really feel like it's important for us to speak up about whatever cause we're passionate about. We can make a change, but it takes
Yeah.
stepping forward. Yeah, and I recently decided, I'm super excited actually, to donate a part of the proceeds from the sale of my book to
Mm.
the American Wild Horse
Yay.
campaign. Yeah, because I feel like
Oh.
that's a way to put the message out. I feel so grateful to Comanche because, like I said, he saved my life so many times. So here's a way I can give back. I live out in
Mm.
Hawaii and I can't adopt a million Mustangs, though I wish I could. And
Me too.
so here's a way to help propel this message out and generate a little bit of money towards this
Mm.
cause I feel very passionate about.
That's wonderful. Yeah, great. Aw, so when your book is available, how do people find it?
Yes. There is a link on my website. Well, first of all, you could go to Amazon, Grace Grit
Yep.
Gratitude, Tara Coyote. You can find it there. I'm sure it'll be easy to find. I also will have a link probably on both of my websites. I'll just tell you now. I'm in the process of figuring this out now, but it'll be
Mm-hmm.
Wind Horse Sanctuary slash Tara's book.
Yeah.
And then my other website, I have two websites. One is about the horse work, and another one is about the cancer journey. The other one is Cancer Warrioress. I'll spell Warrioress,
Yep.
WARRIORESS / Tara's book. So that's a way to
Perfect.
check that out. And then, of course, I have my main Instagram page at Tara Coyote, and I also have a book page now on Instagram. It's at Grace Grit Gratitude Book. I also have a
Awesome.
YouTube
Lots of
page too,
ways.
but anyways, lots
I
of
love it.
social
I'm the
media
same.
links.
So I have this page and this
I know.
page. That's awesome. And quite possibly everyone, by the time this podcast comes out, that we're going to be closer to the time where Tara's book is out in the world. So go have a look. I'm going to include all the links at wholehorse.ca. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, you can head over to wholehorse.ca and look up Tara's episode, and all of the links will be there under her episode. And you can go check those out, and the ways to connect with her as well. So yeah, so you can see it all there. And I've so appreciated our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Alexa. Really an honor to chat with you. And thank you, everybody else, for listening. Appreciate you taking time to hear my story.
It's an amazing story, really. And I'm so glad that you're healing and feeling settled, and you've got your horses and your horse medicine there with you. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important
Mm.
to always count your blessings and look at the beauty.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. That's a good way to go out today. Oh, all right. Thanks everybody for listening in. So appreciate it. And we'll be back soon with more podcasts for you. Talk soon. I'm excited to share that I have opened the registration for the Whole Horse Apprenticeship for 2021 starting September 15th. So if that's something that's been on your mind, on your heart, and something that interests you, you can check it out. I've included the link in the resources, or you can go to alexalinton.com/apprenticeship-2021 to find out more. All right. Wishing you all so well, and looking forward to connecting more and more over the coming months.